we can put it up on YouTube in due course. We're now recording, and I'm very, very pleased to introduce to you Jo Barker, who is a friend of mine for many years. She is absolutely rooted in permaculture and forest gardening. She's part of the East Kent Permaculture Network, and also Future Food Forests is another one of her projects. She's been doing forest gardening for 20 years, permaculture for 30 years, and foraging. And she works as a consultant, a designer, and a teacher or an educator in all of these things. And so she is just a mine of information and experience. And so we're very pleased to welcome her to talk to us tonight about forest gardening and about permaculture. So, Jo, over to you.
Well, thank you for that introduction, Griselda. That's great. Yeah, and thanks for your enthusiasm over so many years. So I've put together a little slideshow, and I'd also like to share a short video with you. And really, it's just exploring what permaculture is and forest gardening, and there'll be time for questions and discussion.
Okay.
Do we need to mute?
Yes, if people would like to mute. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to play this video. And I'm sorry, I just started it there. So you probably heard Jo talking.
Oh, is that what it was? I'll just introduce the video. So I was hoping, well, it's really to show you around a forest garden. And it's a video of me harvesting or foraging for a super salad during the first lockdown. And it was my home garden at the time. I've moved since then, but it's just to give you a flavour of how to utilise a forest garden and how abundant and how much is edible in a short space. So it's about 7 minutes long, but I hope you'll enjoy it, and I'll see you back after that.
Okay, here we go. We're just going to play this now, assuming I can get it to go. Here we are, and I'll make
Hello, and welcome to my living larder and medicine chest. My name's Jo Barker, and this is my garden, and I'm on a mission to help garden foraging be a main activity, because we all have lots of food we probably don't realise in our gardens, and it's really good for us. It's nutritious and free. And today I want
I could just speak alongside. So I'll just talk, shall I? I don't know what's gone. So we'll share a link so you can watch the video if you want to later. But I'm basically just foraging in a sort of a square meter, really. And I hold the unofficial record for a number of ingredients in a salad, which I'll let you guess in a minute. So this is in April during the first lockdown. And that's a peach tree. There's young peach tree leaves, and there's some pear blossom, and that's a strawberry tree, but there wasn't anything edible that day. And then there's lots of things on the ground. That's a perennial buckwheat leaf. So that was lemon balm, and there's some mints there. You can see a daylily there, but that's more for the flowers, although you can eat the young leaves. And there's some daisies. Saying daisies are really great because they have pollen in, and there's not a lot of things that we eat with pollen in. There must be some sort of superior nutritional quality to eating flowers with pollen. And come June, actually come May, there's loads of flowers all through the summer as well. So one of the other things I say is that I always forage for a base plant. So in this case, it's perennial buckwheat, but lime leaves make a great base. That's a violet leaf, and then that's cleavers. So I harvest a little bit of lots of things. There's the perennial buckwheat again, yeah, which is related to Japanese knotweed, so it's very invasive. So I do share it, and I give people warnings. But it's such a brilliant plant to have that I really recommend having it. That's a bit of yarrow. So a lot of this is medicine, herbal medicine, as well as food. And So it just goes on and on like this. So there's a hawthorn, that's a violet. That garden was covered in violet flowers. You can eat the young leaves and the flowers, and they're beautiful. And of course, this is all great for wildlife as well. There's the hawthorn leaf. I eat the hawthorn leaves all through the year, but they're particularly good in the spring. I think the flowers probably haven't started yet on the hawthorn. Yeah, that's the pear blossom. So it just goes on and on and on and on. And then there's loads of other things. This is just in a small area. So this is a specially designed garden for eating. And every day of the year we can find something to eat, a soup or a salad. And one of the other tricks is having a nice salad dressing. But I make what's called medicine soup and put all these things in with some red lentils and onions, and it's just very easy to do and super nutritious. And I rarely get ill. I think it's just very good for our bodies. That's Alexander's. Oh no, that's lemon balm. Alexander's is coming up. So I was just saying, lemon balm's a great vegetable, and it makes great tea, and you can have it in the salad. And all these different flavors all sort of disappear when you add the salad dressing. I should put my video back on. It's funny. My hair was a lot shorter then. So that's another fennel. That's Himalayan honeysuckle. That was a lovely moment when I realised you could eat the berries and they taste like butterscotch. Lots of people have this plant in their garden and don't realise it's edible. Of course, it's great for the birds as well, but it really is delicious. But at this time of year, I do eat the young leaves, but one of the things I say here is that, oh, there's the Alexanders, that you have to be really 100% sure about what you're picking. That's the number one and most important rule of foraging. So the Alexanders is quite a strong taste, but I've grown to like it over the years. It is nice in a soup. It's sort of, I use it instead of celery. It's the same family. And geraniums, it's like a major ground cover in all my gardens, because I make lots of gardens too. And geranium flowers and leaves are both edible. Again, a strong taste, but you know, when it's all mixed up with a nice salad dressing, then it all combines to be delicious. So it's usually just one leaf of this, one leaf of that, a bit of rosemary. Yeah, so there's the perennial buckwheat again. I'm just saying that's the base. When the lime trees start making leaves, I had two in this garden. They were in every single salad, and they're just really, really nice. So I do like to grow a bit of lettuce as well, but it's not necessary. I think there's something about speed, and I think a lot of things that are quite sustainable and for resilience are slow things, and like foraging a salad like this takes time. It's not like you just go to your fridge and it takes 2 minutes to chop up a bit of lettuce. To harvest my super salad record, which I'll tell you in a minute, took 1.5 hours. But that's the benefits, are not just having a nice meal, they're also a way of connecting to the garden. And you sort of get to know all the plants really intimately, because you're touching them and smelling them and tasting them, and you become part garden. And also, it's sort of that special nutrition which you can't buy in shops, and it's a lot of these plants are perennial, which I'll talk about later, but they draw up minerals from deep in the soil. They've got access to different nutrition than, you know, soil vegetables grown like in annual vegetables. So we've got hollyhocks behind there too. I think I'm winding up now. I've never done this before. It's quite bizarre talking along to a video. But yeah, my daughter was filming this, and she when we left this house, which was nearly a year ago, she presented me with our last meal as a foraged salad, and it was making this video which helped her learn lots of foraging plants. And it's one of the things she did a lot during the lockdown. So that was just such a delightful moment to see her coming in with the basket full of beautiful forage things from the garden. And she continued.
Noises, sorry.
What was that, Griselda?
There's a loud noise that's coming over the channel, and I'm not quite sure why. Can everybody hear it?
Hello, welcome to Exotic Ghani UK.
Oh, I see. It must be from the. I see. I beg your pardon. It's from the YouTube channel. So I'll just get rid of that. Sorry. Beg your pardon. That's better. Sorry.
Thanks.
Oh, yeah.
So you might notice I did some talks for the National Forest Gardening Scheme last year, and I shared that with them, which is why it's got their name on it. But if you're interested, if you like what I talk about tonight, I've got 2 more talks that the National Forest Gardening Scheme website has listed, and lots of other people doing talks. Some really, really nice things there. Okay.
Right. So that is the video. And I'm going to now, you're now co-host, but Joe, so if you want to share your screen,
Okay.
go on to your slide presentation.
Does anyone have any questions about that before we go on?
No, it was very difficult to hear sometimes because of the 2 levels of talk, but never mind. The picture's wonderful.
I couldn't hear anything.
I'd like to ask you, Joe, if there's any books that you can recommend that can tell us what's edible, if it's an edible plant book.
Yeah, I just have one here. So of course there's lots of foraging books, but there's also a really good database called the same name. So if you know the name of a plant, you can look it up on Plants for the Future, and it's got listed 7,000 temperate plants. It tells you how to eat it, how you can use it for medicine and fiber and other uses.
Right, okay, thank you.
Okay.
Right, well, if you want to share your screen now.
Sure.
The wonders of Zoom.
Trying to see, how do I share it?
There should be a green thing saying share screen.
No.
We had all this set up earlier, didn't we?
Bottom row, if you put
at
the
the bottom in the middle, it should say share screen, and you just
if you put the cursor onto the black pictures.
I haven't got any buttons on the oh, there we go, share screen. Okie doke.
There we are.
Right, there's me looking up the Persian ironwood. Right, here's my slideshow.
Marvellous.
So I've got about 30 slides, and I'm going to give you quite a big picture of permaculture and forest gardening. And there's lots of each of the slides, or quite a lot of the slides, have different forest gardens. I did a tour last year through the UK and like Scotland, Wales, England, and also the Isle of Man. So there's pictures from all over the place. So I'll mention a few things about them. So does anyone recognise this picture? I'll tell you. Well, it's the Physic Garden. Actually, Griselda recognised it earlier. So I've been doing some talks there and workshops this year, and it's been the most amazing place. I'm so grateful. And they've got a purpose-made forest garden at the bottom, which Hilary helped make. When I met with Hilary, we had a great discussion a few months ago about, and Suzanne, who's the manager there, about actually how the whole garden is turning into a forest garden. So I think the whole thing is a forest garden. Right, so permaculture has been my passion for over 30 years, and forest garden is a technique which I've come to absolutely love. So I sort of feel like I've dedicated my life to it now. I'm just blown away by it, and I love it, and I really believe that it's a solution to many problems. Permaculture is about designing solutions, and forest gardening is a technique that already does that. So I'm not going to go into much detail about these threats, but I just thought it's worth mentioning because we probably all know, but I think it's, for me, I need to just, it helps me to review this. The fact that we are in a climate emergency right now, I'm a director with the Canterbury Climate Action Partnership, and it's something that I've just feel very active about. And I mean, for those of you that remember Agenda 21 and even in the 70s, this is not a new thing. But now we're seeing the effects, and trees have a big important part to play with the climate emergency and climate action. In fact, they are the keys, and they are a nature solution. The biodiversity crisis, I'm going to mention that in a minute, but I don't know if many of you have heard of Mass Extinction 6. We're actually in an extinction event right now. Mental health, apparently by 2030, that's going to be so bad that it's going to be a massive issue for all of us. Apparently 1 in 4 of us now have a mental health issue during every year. That's a quarter of us, and that's probably underestimating. Food security, maybe we don't feel it in our privileged lives in England, Faversham area, but it could be, well, we have seen shelves emptying, but our food, the soils are being depleted, the bees are under threat, and it's just, our food system, the way it is quite fragile. Yeah, and we could go on and on, but the point about this, it's a hopeful. I got told off for talking about this last time I did a slideshow, but I think it's really good to face these things and know that there's ways to be positive. And I think one of the big messages I get from the permaculture way of thinking about things is to think global and act local, and that's what trees can help us do. And I like that picture. I first came across permaculture in 1990 when I watched a television programme called Visionaries on Channel 4, and it was what Bill Mollison said that got me interested. And it's very rare that I watch something and then have to find out more. But he said, burn the universities. And I was at university at the time, but keep the forests. They can teach us everything we need to know. And that was just a really strange thing to hear. And I was quite curious to what he meant. And so that started me on my journey of learning about permaculture. We have in this picture several forest gardens. One on the left is in Dover, in Guston, and you can see lots of fennel in flower and daylilies. And then we've got one in the corner, the Windmill Community Garden, which I helped design and make in Margate. And the bottom picture with the woman is Addie from Plants for the Future, harvesting apples. She's got one of the oldest food forests in the country, which I was lucky enough to visit last year twice. So I'm going to just introduce permaculture because it underlies everything to do with food forests and forest gardening. And I just think this is a really beautiful map to know about. And it's so simple, but it's so brilliant. So permaculture is basically about permanent human culture. It was sort of uncovered in the 70s by Bill Mollison, who I just mentioned, and David Holmgren, who's really the key person leading the movement now. And they started off by developing permanent agriculture, which was using perennial plants, very much like forest gardening, actually. And it's sort of been developed over the years. So underlying permaculture design, which is about design, is these 3 ethics of caring for the earth, which is all life systems, all of life, caring for people, which is making sure that people's needs are met, and fair shares, which I translate as good use of resources. This one keeps changing. It's also known as future care. And I really like the idea about parity, where the fairness, it might look different for different people, but it's like helping people have, making sure that there's a, sort of a baseline fairness, so that people can have access to land and food, like just making allotments accessible is quite key, rather than 7-year waiting lists. Okay. So I focused this slideshow on trees. So the next few slides are going to include a lot of trees. So the other side of permaculture is about principles which are observed from the natural systems, and these principles we apply to design. So here we've got two principles, which is work with nature, not against it, which can be translated in many ways. But when you work with the flow and work with what nature's providing, then it's just so much easier and better for everyone. I'll explain that a bit more when I show you the picture of succession, because that's what really forest gardening is about. So everything gardens mean that every creature and plant, including us, we do things that garden or modify our environments. So rabbits, even slugs are gardeners. You know, not all slugs are bad. Yeah, so there are a couple of principles. Right. Oh yeah, so this is not a tree picture. I wasn't sure where to put this one, but I thought it was important to show the context of where we are now with food. And a lot of people will shop in places like this, and their food comes in plastic bags and wrapped. And this is quite an old slide. I think I found 12 years ago, but I still use it because I think it's so shocking, but so normal for a lot of people. And this is the way we farm for those things that go in the plastic packets. So this is how, I mean, it's the way it's an industrial food system that uses chemicals, and that is how the majority of food is made. This is a food forest that was planted about over 30 years ago. It's Plants for Future in Cornwall, and it's just the most incredible, beautiful place. I think it was it's around 30 acres, and half of it was planted with native plants and half of it was planted with unusual edibles and unusual edibles. So a lot of fruit trees and shrubs. And I'll explain more about forest gardening system in a minute, but I just wanted to show this slide because we have evolved from the trees. Indigenous peoples all over the world still live in forests, and this is a way we can be indigenous again and meet many of our needs, and it's just a beautiful thing. Okay, so the forest gardening concept was well, it's not new, but it was brought to the UK and named forest gardening by Robert Hart. This is a picture of him in his garden in 1997, but he developed it in the 70s as a technique, and he was inspired by the home gardens in Kerala, which is a picture on the right. So what we know about forest gardens, which is amazing, is that they're as old as us, and I believe that we were always forest gardeners, and perhaps we were hunter-gatherers too, but we've always been gardeners. So we're hardwired to garden, and that's maybe why we like it so much. So these home gardens were places for food and medicine and fibre, and they've got different names in different places in the planet. And there's an idea that even the Amazon rainforest is a huge food forest that's been gardened by humans for millennia. Oops, I've just made this slide. Oh, sorry. So I'm going to come back to that in a second. I'll do it now. Okay. So, whoops, sorry. Okay. So, so the reason why I showed this is that I wanted to mention about the biodiversity crisis. So I was at a talk, you know, we've got this wonderful university at Kent and Christchurch, of course. They're both very eco-minded, and somebody from World Wildlife Fund came to do a talk there, and I was really shocked at what he said. So I'd like, if you're around, I'd like you to put in the chat box, we're going to do a little poll. Okay, just have a guess, and you might know this already, but just have a guess at what percentage of wild mammals are in the world, and in comparison to humans and domestic animals. So just put in the chat, have a wild guess. Griselda, can you read out what people put?
Yes, okay.
When
Um,
when I first guessed this, I thought it was 20% humans and domestic to wild. That was my guess.
so I don't fully understand the question. So you're saying if the humans are one lot, how does that compare with all the other mammals? Is that right?
Yes. What percentage of mammals on the planet are wild, and what percentage are human and domesticated?
Oh, I see. Okay.
So just put the wild percentage down.
Okay. Well, I'm going to put 30%.
Okay. Yeah,
Um,
sorry, I thought 80% were wild. That was my guess, and 20%
all right.
for the others. Yeah, but 30%, yeah.
Okay. I don't know. Has anyone else? If you see the chat box, if you want to type in what you think. I'm not seeing a slew of answers here.
That's all right. That's all right. So this was a talk that I went to in 2018, and I've heard it. It's got a lot lower. So in 2018, this was a guess that it was 4%. I know.
Right.
So
Good grief.
I know, it's really shocking. It's really upsetting actually. And part of it's because they've lost their habitats. And this 60% decline is part of that. And this is what we mean by the mass extinction event. It's just happening under our noses. So the World Wildlife Fund are doing every 2 years they do an audit, and they've been doing it since the 70s, which is why they've got these figures. So I've heard another figure which is 1%. So apparently about 30% is human mammals, and 36%, and the rest is domesticated, like livestock, basically. Okay, right. So function and yields of a tree. So this is when we get to the permaculture stuff. So function. So one of the principles of permaculture is that yields are theoretically unlimited, and also that yields are only limited by our imagination. And these are some of the many yields from a tree. And as I said before, permaculture is about designing solutions. So so trees are really useful. So we can have our beautiful forests, but also have biofuels. There's a whole thing called carbon farming, where there's whole systems of ways of getting everything we need on scale as well. We can have wood for bowl making, pencils, wood. It's a good shelter for wind. Of course, wildlife. We've heard statistics like oak trees can support over 300 different kinds of life, although a lot of it's when the oak tree has died and it's in the deadwood. There's a lot of stuff in the soil, the mycorrhizal relationships with the trees and the way they're connected. They are deep mineral accumulators, and when they drop their leaves on the soil, that allows all those minerals to be accessible for the rest of the plants around. Their trees are in medicine. I'm doing a medicinal forest gardening course at the moment with Anne Stobert, and that's fascinating. We've got almost everything's medicine. So they also put oxygen into the air and take carbon dioxide out. A mature tree can sequester over, well, there's different statistics, but over a ton in 40 years of carbon. And again, there seems to be different statistics, but trees when they're young seem to are able to do it more effectively. And coppicing and pollarding also generates more growth, which generates more carbon sequestration. So they're also useful for chilling out there, which is well-being. I've got a little list here, I'm just going to check. They provide jobs for people harvesting fruit, for example. They can help reduce noise pollution and light pollution and air pollution. Griselda was saying to me earlier about some statistics she saw about how they can help save money, and how trees can save up to £60,000 in their life in an urban environment because of all the ecosystem services they provide. And they're also very healing. There's a lot of research now, for example, in the forest bathing statistics in Japan. There's a lot of evidence-based measurements about how being in a forest can reduce our stress and help our immune systems. So trees are not on their own. They are part of a bigger system with the birds, with us, with the air, with the soil. And that's really important to remember. And that's where forest gardening starts coming in. So this is the key. And I remember I trained as a landscape architect, and this idea of succession on the land wasn't part of my education, but it was on my permaculture course that I learned this. And this blew my mind. We were taken to a field, and the teacher, who was Patrick Whitefield at the time, a very famous teacher, he said, "What do you think happens if you just do nothing on the field?" And I had no idea. I just didn't know. At that point, I think I was like 20, 21. And but it's so obvious when you notice, when you know the land, you know this. So there's a succession that happens from the bare rock to a full forest. And then even with the full forest, there's more succession as there's big winds that blow big trees down. And if you've read Wilding by Isabella, is it Isabella Tree? She talks about the lifespan of an oak being 1,200 years, which if you haven't been to Nonnington Oak, you can see it there, our largest tree. I'm just going to do a time check. I feel like I'm probably talking a lot. I can't see the time. Yeah, so 400 years until it reaches full size, 400 years where it creates stability with buttress, the branching reaching the ground, and then 400 years as it's a very old tree and starts to end its life, but it just keeps expanding. So there's a lot we don't know. But anyway, this succession picture is really important to forest gardening, because what we're doing is aiming for mid-succession, not for, and we're not, forest isn't even, there's been a lot of debate about the word forest, and it's because forest really means or suggests a closed canopy, but we're aiming for a more open, like woodland edge planting. So what is forest gardening? So it's really about planting in layers in time and space, and it's substituting plants that we might find in the natural system for things that are productive for us. So you can have sort of plants that are native in a forest garden system, and that would look like a hedgerow probably, or the edge of a native woodland. And it's really important that we include native plants too, but it's also important that we learn, we grow plants that we need, so we don't need to go to the supermarkets and drive there and get aeroplanes to ship things in. We can provide lots of our needs from doing this system, and it's so beautiful, and wildlife live in it too, and it provides medicine and lots of benefits. And another good thing is that it doesn't need loads of work. So some forest gardens are planted and left, and I've seen them where people just go in with like machetes basically and carve out a path so they can reach all their fruit trees and shrubs. And so just to describe this picture, this is the sort of what people define as a forest garden, but it's a pattern, but it can be more, it can be less. Basically, we aim for the 7 layers, starting with the top canopy, the apex tree. This could be an oak tree or a large plum. And then we go for the smaller trees, sort of like fruit trees. They're often on smaller rootstocks. Shrub layers can include currants and berries. I like Lavatera, it's my favourite edible shrub. It's also evergreen. You can eat the leaves and flowers. Then you've got the herbaceous layer, then you've got the root layer, and then you've got ground cover, and then the vertical layer, which is a bit more tricky. But I've seen runner beans grow up. You can plant annuals too in these systems. They're mostly perennial. But kiwis, roses is quite common. Yeah, and if you've got fences, lots of smaller gardens do, that counts as well when you cover the fences with these things. Some ground cover plants are also climbers. So at the bottom I've mentioned food forest. That's the sort of new name, and I like that a lot. We've set up the Future Food Forest social enterprise with the idea of them being food, but not just for humans, but for all of the wildlife too. Agroforestry is also forest gardening is a form of agroforestry. Agro meaning agricultural, and forestry meaning trees. Agroecology and regenerative farming, these are all names for different systems. which do include forest gardening. Griselda, how am I doing for time? I can't see my.
I think you're doing fine. Just carry on. That's great. Keep going.
Okay. All right. So this is
You're
a
about
project in
30 minutes.
Canterbury.
You're about 30 minutes in at the moment.
Okay. Thank you. So yeah, this is something we did in July with young people. We ran an introduction to permaculture course, and it was such a brilliant project. So what we have here, for those, I don't know if any of you know this place. It's an Abbott's Mill, and it's I think it's St Radigan's Lane, opposite the Miller's Arms, and it's a little oasis of. It's mostly sycamores, but it's just a natural place that's just full of birds and wildlife, and it's just such a beautiful place. As soon as you step out the gate, it's onto the street, cars, people, Western life, and it's that contrast. It just gets me every time. And we ran this project called We Are Nature, and we're hoping to raise some money to create a forest library there, and it's like a re-indigenization project, but we realize that's not a very good name, but it helps us have skills and learn to be humans being in the forest again. So things like honoring the cycles of the year, learning to forage, to make dyes, and to be together. These young people really, really loved it, and we did a design process of the site, and we've been meeting there. We've had a permaculture picnic there at the end of September, and we are planning to meet in a couple of weeks. You can come and support the project if you like, second Sunday of the month, and that's ongoing. But this is Joe and Terry, who run the project, would like to develop this as a food forest, and we've got some ideas for that. But this is a lot, yeah. So this is one of the projects. There's my lovely Helen Smith, who is a co-teacher with me, and all the lovely people. My daughter's there. Okay, so the rewilding's become a bit of a buzzword, but I think it's a good description, but we need to include humans in it. So children naturally know what to do in the woods, but I think a lot of people don't spend much time out in the natural world and are disconnected from it. And I'm just going to mention that because I think that's a key part of the work that the Future Food Forest project wants to address. It's helping us find a way to reconnect to the natural world and ourselves and each other. And forest gardening is a great method. So this is a nice picture showing what happens underground as well. And because we generally just see what's on the surface, but there's been lots of research looking at the root area, and you can see that all of these plants have quite deep root systems. So they're going to be more likely to reach water when there's a drought, and tap minerals and bring them to the surface. So I put together this little list for this slideshow, thinking actually there's trees for all different reasons, and just for, I just thought this would be quite nice as we're talking about trees. So fruit trees, we've got a whole range, probably everyone knows. I should have added mulberry. Apparently white mulberry has one of the most nutritious leaves of all food, so that's nice to know. But yeah, we know about fruits. I was going to say Amelanchier or Juneberry is also a beautiful fruit tree and very decorative for a small garden. Nuts, hazel, pine, sweet chestnut. Nuts could be an important future food, and I would include oak trees as well. And apparently 3 sweet chestnut trees could meet all our needs for carbohydrates equivalent to eating wheat, and it makes lovely flour. We've got edible trees with edible leaves like lime, like I mentioned earlier, and Tunis sinensis, which has got lots of names. Flamingo tree is one of them. Spices, there's pepper trees. Actually, there's one at Mount Ephraim, which is quite cool. Winter fruit, strawberry tree. I mean, this is just a beautiful evergreen. UKC's got loads of big, very mature strawberry trees. And if you go there at this time of year, I predict that you'll see these little red strawberry looking fruits. And they're not very tasty, but it is like the middle of winter and you can eat them. So it's quite a treat. So I recommend going finding one of those. And they grow, I think they grow in the shade. They prefer slightly acid soil. So nitrogen fixing is quite interesting function for trees, and Siberian pea trees also edible. So the nitrogen helps capture nitrogen from the air, and there's bacterial association on the roots, which help take it into the soil and make it accessible for other plants. Medicinal plants, ginkgo, oh my God. We have got, I mean, ginkgo it's a really ancient tree. It's really, really old, and it's beautiful. And there's a pair, a female and a male, in Dane John Gardens, and they have nuts. They're very smelly, but they have these amazing nuts. So in fact, it's probably not too late to go and harvest some. They're probably all lying there because nobody realizes you can eat them. I haven't been this year, but yeah, the leaves are meant to be helpers. I think they're meant to be anti-inflammatory, but certainly they're good for our they're tonic for our blood. Elder is another medicinal super one, and it's meant to be good immune system plant, and they call it the medicine chest, and it's the one thing I make every year. I make some tonic. Of course, we've got wood for furniture like oak and walnut, firewood. I know someone that's starting to grow coppiced apple trees for firewood, and of course sweet chestnut. If you've got a log burner in Kent, you're probably burning sweet chestnut and hazel. Hedges, beech is the classic, and it has these juvenile leaves every year because we prune it, so it's always got these beautiful young leaves on the edges which stay all winter long. It's only young leaves that do that, which is why beech often keeps its leaves through the winter. And then the wildlife benefits I've already mentioned. Okay. Oh, sorry, I'm just going to whisk past. Oh, what's going on? All right. So design. So going back to permaculture and forest gardening, it's about designing systems. And that's one of the skills that I have, and everybody can do it. So we do it naturally. We're all designers. I'm not going to go too much into this, but we need to survey, and we need to work out where the sun is and the water. In this country, we need to maximize our sunlight, we've got lots of things that grow in the shade, but we need to make the most of the sun. Whereas in tropical food forests, of which there are many, they've got different, they need shade. Okay, so this is the first forest garden design I did, well, the second actually, in 2007 in Sheldwich, and it was very simple. I just designed in set areas, and then we just got the plants when we could. There's some more principles. I just mentioned one more. So I say all waste is an unused resource. So in the natural systems, you don't get any waste because there's no such thing as waste. All waste things are unused resources. And I just love this principle on its own. When we don't use a resource, it turns into pollution, and that can be applied to anything. I didn't make it clear, but permaculture is not just about growing food, it's about everything in human life. And we could say that unemployment is an unused resource, or when you've got lots of money in the bank and it's just sitting there, that's an unused resource. And what else? When we've got a house full of stuff that we don't use. I've just moved house literally last night at 10 o'clock. I arrived in my new place, and I have got so much stuff that I don't use. It's just like, oh God. And that's a pollution in terms of having to keep moving it around. Okay, so yeah, in forest gardens we don't have waste. Everything's used. We design ground covers to keep the water in the soil, and we use mulches to start with, and then they like wood chip, and then we turn them into green living manure. People are an important part of it. There's a number of community forest gardens. In fact, every community garden I know now has a forest garden. It's like something that seems to be a pattern. So foraging we've already talked about too. There's another picture of the garden from the slideshow. Got a picture there of of the there we go, got a cursor. There's the strawberry tree plants. There's some elderberry tonic. And there's some people enjoying the food forest. Yeah, I didn't mention about the number of food ingredients, but I'll come to that when I finish the slideshow. So yeah, so wanted to talk about plants again. This is a forest garden I've helped make in Ramsgate. It's 12 years old now and it's just beautiful. That's where we foraged our super salad record, and they are full of perennial plants. So here's one of the salads at the bottom. There's a lot of flowers in them, depending on the time of year. You can see that's calendula, and there's an nasturtium, and a holly. That's not hollyhock. That is a lavatera. But they will. I don't think the hollyhocks have started. This must be sort of early summer. This bottom one's part of the Eden project. They've got a whole section in the car park of forest gardens, which are very, very beautiful. I mentioned this one earlier, the Windmill Community Garden in Margate. We made a forest garden there, and it was designed like a tree, the shape of a tree with a main path. You can't quite see it in the drawing, but it was very carefully designed. If any of you know it, this forest garden is right at the end of a long L-shaped allotment community garden, and it's locked behind gates, and it's literally is the last place to get any attention. So the plants in here had to be like the thugs that would just survive. Things like daylilies and Michaelmas daisies, all the daisy family actually, and things like that. And it stood the test of time. So, and it just seemed to be a very beautiful, popular place. This is where I was living or staying until yesterday. I wasn't living there, I was staying and working on this farm, and I still am. This is near Bourton, and it's called Tree of Life. It's a veganic project, and there's alley cropping. You can just see here, there's some willow in the foreground, and then there's lines of mulberry and hazel, and in between there's been lines of alleys of vegetables and heritage grain. This is a technique which has been researched. Wakelands in East Anglia is leading on this, and I went to a conference there a few months ago, and the Soil Association have got lots of statistics on how farmers who want to do more carbon friendly farming can do this, and it's a technique that really works, and it's going to be more popular, I think. Oh, I thought I'd mention this because I remember years ago when Faversham had a transition group that someone did a foraging map of Faversham, and I can't remember who did it, but this is this basically I discovered that everywhere's a forest garden, and you can forage everywhere in a town. And here's some examples in Loughborough. So they made this map, which I think is beautiful, to help people as a guide. Yeah, so that's the end. So I just want to do a plug for myself. Griselda's encouraged me to do this. So this is what I do for a living. It's a big part of my life. I help make and design edible, healing, beautiful wildlife landscapes for climate action, for food security, biodiversity and well-being, and also nature connection and foraging. I do all this combination of things, and I just love it. That's my daughter there last summer, doing some work for me in one of the gardens. And yeah, they're just very beautiful, abundant places. Okay,
Marvelous, thank you. If you stop sharing your screen now.
oops. Yeah,
Marvelous, thank you. Well, my goodness, that's a huge amount of information in a short space of time. I expect people may have some questions. Do feel, if you unmute yourselves and just ask away. I know you showed a book earlier on. Is that a book that would give an indication of the kind of plants that we could use if we were starting to make a forest garden? Ah, creating a forest garden. Right, you're muted, Joe, actually, at the minute. Creating a forest garden.
sorry. So this is Martin Crawford's really leading the way in forest gardening in this country. He's based in Devon, and he's got online courses which are excellent, and he organised a conference in June this year, which was amazing. And it's quite a new field, but there's lots of people doing research all over the world. he's got a whole series of books out. But like I said earlier, the Plants for Future database has sections about collections plants, and that's a go-to place.
Excellent. And is it true? It was difficult to hear with your foraging film because actually we could hear the soundtrack and then you were talking over it as well. So we might snip that out of the recording later on, but because it was quite difficult to hear it. Is it actually true that you can actually forage every day of the year? Is that true?
Yes, every day of the year, everywhere. In gardens, beaches, woodlands.
Amazing.
Yeah. So I couldn't hear anything on mine.
Well, that was just a technical glitch, but we could hear the soundtrack of your video and you talking over it.
Oh,
so.
sorry, I didn't realise that.
Well,
How annoying.
What?
we could.
Oh, well,
We couldn't hear.
We couldn't.
No, we could. We
Well,
could hear the
we heard the
soundtrack.
first-
We just heard Joe talking.
We heard the
Oh, right.
first
Well, that
few-
was lucky for you
few
then, because
bits,
I
and
heard
it's-
both. It was very peculiar. Anyway, never mind.
Can I just ask a question?
Yeah.
Sorry, if with the gardens, do you notice that there are a lot more insects than there are? Do your gardens attract more insects than mine? My garden is so uninsecty, it's awful, and I just wondered whether that kind of gardening attracts more.
I think it's a good question. I think I got asked to design a edible wildlife garden in 2014. And I hadn't realised until then I was actually making wildlife gardens. I hadn't made that connection. It was just, I liked wildlife and I was aware that what we were doing was good for wildlife. But actually, what wildlife needs, we're talking about insects and bird mainly, and the invertebrates, is they need shelter and food and water. So add a pond, add some unmown grass. There's a really good book by Frances Tophill called Rewild Your Garden, which is, she's got about forest gardening in there, and it's basically having lots of diversity of habitats. So when you've got trees, shrubs and ground covers, when you leave things on the ground like dead sticks, so when we garden in our forest gardens, there's a way of doing it where you don't deadhead everything. Like for example, if you've got yarrow, which I eat, leaving some of the dead flowers on are great places for little insects to hide out, and the hollow stems of holly, not hollyhocks, but some of the like nettles, and there are loads of just providing food and shelter is all we need to do. And ponds, the essential thing, that's a wildlife magnet. You can even make one in a little old washing up bucket.
Yeah.
I've done that, and it's amazing what that attracts. But the bigger the pond, the better, as far as I'm concerned.
Thank you.
Okay, well, if there are no more questions, I think we can draw it to a close and just say thank you very much indeed, Joe. I hope people come back to you, and perhaps you and I can discuss doing a different take on this at another date, whether it's to go to do a walk around the Physic Garden, again, one of your kind of introduction days or something like that. And let's hope we can get some more work for you. And to remember also that Jo is looking for land to set up a community garden under her own management. So if anybody knows of any estates that have land to dispose of, we'll find a way to put you in touch with them.
Thank you, Griselda.
All right.
Thanks for coming, everyone, on this cold evening in Zoomland. It's been a pleasure.
Well, good night, everybody, and thanks very much for turning up, and see you again soon. Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
I just have to stop the